Hi, I'm Tara Gold. You're joining me at home. At home refers to being at home within oneself, within the world, and at home with spirit. This podcast is raw and it's real. It's sometimes panel style, and it's always shared in a conversational style. Join me here for holistic lifestyle tips that really make a difference with scholars, medical professionals, scientists, cultural creatives, and artists that share through their lens. What all these conversations have in common is that we're all dedicated to empowering and inspiring each other to cultivate inner wisdom and also to share it. Welcome home. We were right home from the start. We are live. And I want to start here by saying hello to my guests. And the first person here is Talayeh Rezayat, Dr. Talayeh Rezayat, and Dr. Danny Lewin. And we are sharing in a conversation today on Let's Talk Sleep. Everybody I know wants to know more about sleep because I would say the majority of people I meet on a regular basis are sleep deprived or having nights where it's just hard to get through a night without tossing and turning and waking up a lot. Hard to go to sleep, hard to get kids to sleep, hard to sleep with somebody next to you that's snoring. There are so many reasons why people have challenges with sleep. And that is why I've been so excited to have this time with both Talayeh and Danny. First, everybody, I want to give a little bit of an overview of my background with both of them. Talayeh and I met years ago when she participated in a training I used to lead at Loyola Marymount University called Yoga and the Healing Sciences Program. And at the time, I remember thinking, wow, she's coming to learn from me? No way. Because her credentials and her work in the world are so inspiring to me that I was just very honored that you chose to spend that time with me and all the people that were there. So Talayeh Rezayat is an Iranian-American physician that specializes in sleep, pulmonary, and critical care medicine. She is currently working as the deputy director of the Sierra Pacific Sleep Community Resource Hub at the Veterans Health Administration, based out of San Francisco. She helps increase sleep care access. In addition to her clinical work, she's an academic appointment at the University of Nevada, Reno, where she enjoys teaching healthcare trainees. Dr. Rezayat completed her undergraduate studies at the University of California, Davis, studying neurobiology, physiology, and behavior. She received her medical degree and master in public health from Des Moines University. She completed her internal medicine training at Keesler Medical Center in Biloxi, and from there she moved back to California for pulmonary and critical care medicine fellowship at the University of California, UCLA, my alma mater. Yay. During this phase of her career, she recognized health disparities in sleep medicine and returned to UCLA for sleep medicine training. Dr. Rezayat's interests include studying yoga and Ayurveda. That's how we met. And she's incorporated this into her Western medical practice and her personal life. Yay. I love that you have. I also want to add that I was so fascinated that in your history and where you come from, that you also were in the military. Do you mind mentioning something about that? Because it certainly gives you a unique perspective in your world of what you share.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the kind words. And there's always things to learn, especially when you're in the medical field. And yoga and Eastern medicine is something that they don't teach enough in medical school. So it was definitely a pleasure for me to work with you and learn from your experience and background. The military, I joined the Air Force to help support me through my medical school financially. And I wanted to give back to the country that helped me get established here, being an Iranian, that many people don't have that opportunity. And through my time in the Air Force, that's where I did my internal medicine training. I had the opportunity to go out and do further training with UCLA and really take care of active duty folks that go through a lot. And especially while you're in the military, you're subjected to specific sleep conditions that you wouldn't normally be subjected to, which makes it a very special place to do sleep medicine. And from there afterwards, I really wanted to serve the veterans, since when they separate, a lot of them don't get the best care if they're not in the VA. And so being able to serve the veterans, especially those that live in places with no access, was kind of a passion for me.
I have to say, having known veterans and watching very closely what some of them have gone through, the fact that you've made that the focus in your work means a lot to me personally, because I see how much that training and those experiences for years on end make it really difficult for them to rest or find rest or get through traumatic, post-traumatic stress issues. So thank you for your service with that. It really makes a difference. I'm certain of it. I want to just also compliment and say hello, Danny. Danny Lewin, Dr. Danny Lewin is a sleep specialist, pediatric psychologist, and licensed clinical psychologist. He's board certified in sleep medicine and behavioral sleep medicine. He was the founding director of the Behavioral Sleep Medicine and Pulmonary Behavioral Medicine program at Children's National Hospital, with a joint appointment at George Washington University School of Medicine as an associate professor of pediatrics and psychiatry. He has conducted NIH-funded research over the last 2 decades and worked as a consultant with school districts nationwide as an advocate for healthy school start times. He has published more than 50 articles and chapters. Dr. Lewin is particularly honored to have served as a mentor and supervisor of hundreds of pre- and postdoctoral fellows in psychology, medicine, nursing, and dentistry. Thank you for being here, Danny. It means a lot to me that you're here.
Pleasure to be here and talk about sleep.
Yeah. I also want to say that I appreciate what you said here, that you've worked with postdoctoral fellowships with dentistry as well, because in my world of working with nutrition, there was some incredible studies that made a big impact on my perspective of health and wellness that were done with cats. There's all kinds of stuff, that research that's been done in the past through dentists that had done early research, right? And my understanding is that it's the early barbers or the early dentists that actually led a lot to the field of Western medicine as we know it. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. And we think, in sleep, in many of the sleep disorders that we think about, going to your hygienist 2 times a year, they're the people who are looking in your mouth, which is a very important place.
Unless you're a Chinese medicine doctor.
Yes.
Yeah, so they really gain a perspective, right? That's pretty unusual.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's talk sleep. Where should we begin?
I'm happy to kick off. I think as Talayeh indicated, this is an area where there's just not a lot of education in general for providers on the medical side, psychology side, nursing. And so what we find is that people just don't know basics. So I think one of the things that we want to share is just some of the basics about sleep. What goes on in that black box we call night? What is it? We tend to think about it as just kind of parking the car in the garage and just turning it off, but actually a lot goes on that we can address.
So what goes on? And please, both of you, let's just keep going dynamically with what's your experience of what's really going on when people are sleeping?
If we think about sleep historically, it depends how you're defining it. Physically, you're going into a bed, you're not moving, lights are off, your response time is slower. So all of those things happen. But in the same other side of it, if you think about it, physiologically, there's a lot happening. Your brain's doing things differently. Your hormones are acting differently. The levels are changing. And chemically, we're doing different things. And all of those serve a function. And so I think it's important to think of that in 2 sides of sleep. Sleep, you go lie down, you wake up in the morning, you start over. But a lot is happening physiologically in that time. And we're going to touch on some of those things today.
And Danny, what do you find from all the work that you've had with people in sleep?
So I find that people are just surprised to learn some of the basics, that sleep is not kind of a unitary phenomena that we go through at night, that there's a phenomenal amount that goes on. And the more that the science progresses, the more we find that sleep is actually essential for good physical and mental health and well-being. In fact, you can think about it, if the 4 pillars of primary health are nutrition, exercise, social engagement, the 4th pillar really is sleep. which is essential to all of those. And if we don't know about sleep, we don't think about sleep, we don't ask about sleep, our providers don't ask about sleep, then there's a problem. I mean, we talk about sleep all the time, right? You know, how many times a day do you say, oh my God, how do you feel? Oh, I had such a bad night's sleep last night. Well, I feel good, actually. I feel pretty rested for a change. How many times a day do you say that with people? It's almost like our handshake, right? Sleep talk can almost be our handshake throughout the day.
In my world, it's sleep talk or bowel movement talk, because most people I talk to are constipated and they're having trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
I hate to say
What's funny is that we focus so much on work. We need to work, that the first thing that we lose, that everyone gives up, is sleep. And we don't think about how important sleep is. And without sleep, so many things are affected. You know, we're talking about good health. Our immunity comes down from it. Our memory consolidation goes down. Depending on how sleep deprived you are, you're affecting your heart health also. So I don't know why we've taken this into our culture where I'll sleep less. I just got work to do. So who cares? I'm going to sleep less. And we need to change that culture.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I care about a lot today, in understanding better with both of you present and able to answer questions, is why is it that I need a different time of night to go to bed than my son? He's 10. I know this, I know we're not going to get into children much maybe today, but he's 10, I'm 48, and I'm noticing for years now that he could easily go to bed later than I could. And I'm struck by this. And I've had this experience with many people in my life where some people want to go to bed so much earlier. Others need to go to bed so much later. And I've always thought, well, what's going on here? How come there's so much diversity in what the needs are in terms of length of sleep, or when they need to get to sleep by? Can you speak to this at all?
Sure. So there are genetic differences in among all of us that determine when we sleep, when sleep is optimal. There are developmental changes. So sleep from infancy through our later years, there are significant changes in our circadian system, and we can talk about the circadian system. Circ around 8 in the day. So what we're talking about are biological functions over a 24-hour period, directed by this 24-hour cycle of light and dark that we have. The core really based in that. The other piece that's important to think about is also sleep duration. And so some people go to bed late, wake up late. We call them evening chronotypes. Some people go to bed early. We call them morning chronotypes. Some people need more than 8.5 hours of sleep as adults every single night. Other people kind of get by on 6. And so there's phenomenal variability across people. It's genetic, it's biological, it's cultural. And then just say one more thing, that if you want to think about it in terms of our anthropological history, we would not have survived long as a species if everyone was sleeping at the same time for the same amount. We would be really vulnerable, right? When we evolved during a period when there were a lot of predators around.
That's a fascinating idea that as a species we may not be here if we didn't have those disparities, right? Those differences. Interesting.
I agree with that. And the interesting thing is we say 24 hours, but it's not exactly 24 hours. And that's what makes us a little different also. Some people's biological clock, their tau is 24.1. One other person can be a little longer or a tiny bit shorter, but on average 24.1 is the number. And what we do every day and our genetics really play a role in what time we want to go to sleep. So many people come and say, Doc, I need to go to bed at 9 o'clock. I just can't. And you learn that if they just listen to their body, if their job allows them, and they go to bed when they're sleepy, they won't have any complaints and they'll wake up in a timely hour that they're happy with. But it's also something that we believe we must go to bed at a certain time and we must wake up at a certain time. And that's what makes people worried about their sleep and the time they go to bed. But in your case, teenagers are well known to have what's called a delayed sleep phase. They're night owls. They like to be up at night and sleep in the morning. One of the reasons that the start time of the schools wasn't working for their sleep stage and their wake cycles. And for us, as we get older and wiser, we may want to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier. So we shift with time.
That's interesting because I wonder about that, Danny, with your research and work that you were offering with the school systems. Just what can you just give a quick little overview of what the findings were? Why there was talk about changing the timing of school and when it begins?
Sure. So what Talayeh said is absolutely critical. That at different developmental stages, are literally our genes are coding for different optimal sleep periods. So I'll take a half step back, if that's okay, and just say that about and in fact, if you want to show a slide right now,
Sure.
yeah. So I think maybe about the fourth slide in the deck, if that's easy to get to, just jump forward a little bit.
There you
Yeah,
go.
right here. So what this slide says, I don't know how close people can see it, but I think you're going to end up posting some of this anyway,
Yes.
on your website or a link. But about 4 years ago, the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine went to a few sleep researchers and circadian researchers who identified clock genes about 25 years ago. So what does that mean to have clock genes? That means the clock is in every cell of the body. Uh, even some non-nucleated cells, there's some clock. We won't go into that, but so it's in every cell in the body. And those clocks in individual cells have to coordinate within organs, and they have to coordinate across organ systems, and they have to coordinate even among systems that don't have organs, like immune function, which is much a widely distributed system, and then our neurocognitive function and our cognitive abilities. So we have this really clock. Time is absolutely essential, and that changes across development and changes, as we said, across people. So what you might be able to see here, and I won't go through all of these, but when we go around the clock, this clock here, this little cartoon basically shows that at different times of the day, we're better coordinated, our body temperature changes, our cortisol changes, there's more growth hormone, etc. So a lot of these functions are linked to clock in our cells, deep biology here, as well as it can be a whole host of functions that these impact. So that said, now jumping back to school start times, basically we've known for years, there's a wonderful researcher at Brown University, Mary Carskadden, who did some of the primary work on adolescent sleep. And she demonstrated that their clocks shift. So Talayeh was talking about kind of this variability in clock time, right? So adolescents, you might think about them as actually having more of like a 25 or a 26-hour day, so that they don't go biologically. Okay, this is not because they're rotten and are up late doing the stuff that they love to do, right? It's because biologically they need to go to bed later and wake up later. Deep biology we're talking about here, and then that shifts when we get to kind of the mid-20s. So when you are asking a teenager to wake up, so back in one of the districts that I worked with, Fairfax County Public Schools, about 180,000 kids just outside of Washington, D.C. When those kids are asked to be at school at 7:20 a.m., right? When you back that up, 20, 30 minutes for breakfast, an hour to an hour and a half for bus transit time, right? You're asking these kids to get up at 5:30 in the morning. That's like me, okay, because they're on a different clock. That's like me telling you, you have to get up at 2:30 every morning to go do what you need to do, right? Which biologically is implausible. So we're asking them to be awake at times when biologically they're not prepared to do so.
And no doubt that affects their function in so many ways and their development.
Right. And so, when we wake our kids up at 5:36, even 7:30 or 8 in the morning, and we say, you have to have a great breakfast. If I started force feeding you at 4:30 or 5 in the morning, how would you feel, right? Not only would you not be hungry, but biologically, and this is important, your metabolism is not ready to accept food. What's going on, from our lips all the way through our system is just not ready.
Talayeh, what do you find with that same concept when it comes with working with veterans or people that have had different ways of having to work their cycles with work in general?
So the challenge for adults is their job. Are you a night shift worker? And what are you doing when you're not working? Are you someone who just has an 8 to 5 job? And that's what makes the big difference. for our veterans, were you working in the military up all night because of your situation you were in, and sometimes went with days without sleep? And or were you a security guard up all night and now you're forced to become a day worker and sleep at night? So those are the things that become important in our adult populations. It depends what their history is and what they've done. If you've all your life have had a regular sleep schedule, regular job, probably won't have a lot of issues because of life, if you will. But if you've had these other scenarios, then you really have to work with the person and understand what is causing their issue. If it's because you were up all night for 6 months or longer and now you need to switch, then what's important is patience and making very small changes, using light, using lack of light, if you will, and our activities to get them on a schedule. And sometimes we can use some supplemental medication like melatonin to help with that shift. But if you are currently doing something like night shift and your complaint is, I can't spend time with my family when I'm off because I'm too sleepy, that's a hard one, because it's challenging to try to swap to a day awakeness and then a night awakeness just on a weekend. And that's something that we're probably going to talk about when it comes to healthy sleep habits and things that influence our sleep. So it's super important to understand people's life and what's important to them. Sometimes it could be a perception that you're not getting enough sleep, but you are. Other times it's going to be your life and situation. You have to find the best way to work around it to make it a good life for them and healthy sleep.
So one of the things I heard you just say is that, we don't want to necessarily compare, oh, I didn't get enough sleep because I'm getting less than this other person. It's more, and what I'm hearing is people need to learn how to gauge more from the inside out, that they might have a unique set of cycle needs based on their genetics, based on their age, based on their circumstances that are going to be best suited for them. So am I getting this correct? Is that
100%? Yes.
okay? So if that's the case, how are you helping to have people gauge what's right for them as unique individuals? What are some of the ways that you work with people? I know that people are getting so interested in the technology these days. Like
Yeah.
I get this question all the time. Like, what do you think of the Aura Ring? What do you think of Fitbits? What do you think of the Apple Watches? So I'd love to hear any little thing you might say about that.
Well, let's not talk about technologies yet. The part that becomes personal in all of medicine, not just in sleep medicine, is getting to know your patient, the person you're working with, and understanding what are they doing. So a lot of times when I first visit with a patient, I ask for them to write down a 2-week diary of what do they do. What time do they go to bed? What time do they think they fall asleep? They're not the same, and many don't understand that. What time do they wake up? And what time do they get out of bed? And so those are important things to learn about. What's their environment? What's keeping them awake?
Mm-hmm.
What do they do when they wake up or during the daytime or right before bedtime? What's their stress level? What's going on in life? So first we must learn about people just as one person in their life, and then from there understand what their needs are. Many people think they need 8 to 9 hours of sleep, and we alluded to this earlier. And just by teaching them, try not to sleep that much. What about just start with 7 hours or 6.5 hours and see how you feel? We'll set a set wake up time that works for them and give them a prescribed bedtime. Understanding that failure may happen, and that's okay. We don't want to be too strict because things don't work when we're too strict in anything. And I think that's the first step when it comes to understanding people's needs and how to help them with their sleep. I'll pause here. Danny, have anything to add in?
Yeah, all good topics. I mean, there's so much to unpack. What I'd say maybe is a half step back just to the issue of this issue of sleep duration and sleep timing, right? So we tend to have this bias we have for the past, maybe 1,000 years, that it really is how much we sleep that's important. Well, that's maybe less than 50% of the issue. It's when we sleep. Again, getting back to clock and clock genes, that's perhaps as important or even more important than just sleep duration. I had 8 hours last night. But the key is, and this gets back again to what Talayeh was saying, that if someone has a job, or when you ask a teen to get up at a time and function when they're not biologically optimally functioning, you're really doing damage. I mean, literally, you're doing damage. There are some studies conducted on nurses, the Nurses' Health Study, which has looked at tens of thousands of data points longitudinally for, I don't know, probably 20, 30, 40 years. research conducted by the NIH. When they look at the nurses who were doing shift work versus those who were not doing shift work, right? So exposing people who are doing shift work, and again, we're looking at thousands and thousands of data points of different individuals. Those who did shift work had higher rates of breast cancer, had higher rates of obesity, had higher rates of diabetes, had higher rates of cardiometabolic problems in general. So when we think about not only suboptimal sleep timing, but also insufficient sleep duration for long periods of time, we're literally doing damage to our bodies and brains and hurting ourselves with regard to our mental functioning, our well-being, etc. There's some, great new studies. Maybe we could talk about another time, diving into insufficient sleep effects and like how insufficient sleep leads to Alzheimer's disease and what those scientific links are. What's cool is that science is moving so quickly in this area. And we now know so much about basics. And I'm always up on a soapbox, just giving people the basics about what sleep is, why it's important, and how different it is across the course of the night.
Well, what you're emphasizing, both of you, is significant to me because I've always just thought more is better, or I should even, but I always felt like, oh, but I'm never getting enough, right? So there's this shame factor, like, oh, I don't do it right, right? And then there's this idea that I'm supposed to catch up, like I'm always behind. And I know I'm not alone in this. I hear this constantly with my own clients. I find it interesting, too, the way you both talk about circadian rhythm cycles from a Western perspective. Because in the work that I do with traditional Chinese medicine perspective, we work with meridian theory, and we work with a different kind of perception of how circadian cycle works with regenerative ideas of each organ system associated with different parts of a 24-hour cycle. So when people come to me, I'm always considering what time are they waking up? How long are they awake? And I'm looking at it from the perspective of, which organ is maybe disturbed that's having an impact on how long they're staying awake rather than going back to sleep. And this, I know we had a bit of conversation about this, Danny, not so long ago, because you cued me into the fact that it's quite normal and natural to wake up a few times each night. Can you both talk about this, that there's different phases to sleep? Because I did not know this from a Western perspective model until you told me.
Maybe I'll jump in and just jump in as you have other comments, Talayeh. Maybe I'll show a few slides because this is a great point to show a couple of visuals of this, how varied the sleep period is at night. And just getting to what you're saying, Tara, it's so true that, we do have these misconceptions about sleep, that we can catch up, that we all need 8 hours, etc. It's just, there's variability. And getting back to the other point that I think both of you were making is that an individual approach to understanding what is going on with a single person is so important. We can share some questionnaires and some other tools aside from technology that can be really important.
Recommendations I make for my patients is you need between 6 and 9 hours of sleep, but that depends on you. Science is very clear that less than 6 hours, you'll have health outcomes that you'll do poorly with. More than 9 hours, there's controversy that says you're going to have bad health outcomes if you sleep more than 9 hours also. Of course, there's outliers on both of those ends, but for the majority, 6 to 9, it's a wide range. On average, 7.5 to 8, but you may have 6.5 hours and function 100% great. You may need 9 hours every night and function 100% great. I do not even think our societies have agreed on the exact number. And so that's important to understand.
Yeah. And you think about nutrition. I mean, we have taken the food pyramid from when it was first, used. I don't remember how many, 30, 40, 50 years ago. We've inverted it. We've stretched it. We've changed its colors. But with sleep, we just don't really address kind of these basics about sleep that are so important for people to know for their health. Just so critical.
So what I'm hearing you say is that we've evolved in terms of our ideas around nutrition, but we're still way behind in our perceptions of what is important with sleep. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Oh, yeah.
I think sleep right now is getting attention and growing, but it's very new.
How new would you say?
I don't think I can say for sure, but if I was guessing, I'd say most of the attention in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe even 5 to 8 years.
What about you, Danny? Where do you think this lies?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the key scientific findings have probably been coming online for the past 50 to 70 years, but they're just not trickled in. And so I'd agree with Talayeh that over the past 10 years, some of the sleep health is even like a new concept, right? So sleep health refers to optimal sleep at the optimal time and treating all the sleep disorders that we won't have time to even talk about today. There are 80 sleep disorders that are defined, right?
80.
There's a whole field, right? So yeah, so I'd say that I'd agree that really over the past 10 years, bits of this information have begun to come out. Matt Walker's book, How We Sleep, is a great book, great introduction to book. He's an amazing sleep scientist. He's hilarious, really fun. He's a great speaker. You can also check out his TED Talk. But he really has kind of done a lot to popularize. Arianna Huffington wrote a popular book about sleep. She also has emphasized it. We need more. There's actually a great quote from some great sports people. I'm going to forget his name now. I'm not a sports person. LeBron James, right, has been an advocate for sleep. So we need that sleep slogan, right? Got milk? Well, I don't know what it is going to be for sleep, but we need something.
Let's
like
talk sleep. Let's talk sleep. Let's talk sleep. What do you say, Talayeh?
Better sleep, better health.
There you go. Better sleep, better health.
Absolutely.
So, Danny, I think it's fair to mention that you have a fabulous book you're writing on the topic. And can you say anything about that?
Yeah, well, I'd love to come back and talk to you about it sometime. It's about primarily about pediatric sleep, but really about family sleep, right? So it's really about the cultural history of sleep, how we understand that with regard to how we sleep and why we sleep in certain ways, both personal cultural history, family cultural history, larger culture, larger society. People at the equator sleep very differently than people who live up in our hemisphere because of a whole host of factors. Like if you look at different cultures that are kind of pre-industrial versus kind of post-industrial, now AI era, we're looking at very, very different kinds of sleep, which says something. One take-home message there's a lot to dig into there, but one take-home message is there's a huge amount of flexibility in how humans actually can sleep as a society. You don't want to vary your sleep as an individual from night to night or week to week, but overall, humans have a lot of flexibility about how they can organize their sleep schedule as long as they are regular about that sleep schedule. That's kind of the key point. Anyway, so I'll have a book coming out on family sleep health, also a lot of recommendations on sleep disorders and what you do, and a bunch of the science, and hopefully that'll all be fun in the next year and a half. So
Great.
Hopefully I'll get an invitation back.
Okay, and so shall we get back to this PowerPoint that we were going to look at?
Yeah.
All right. So you're going to explain there's different stages to sleep.
Yeah, exactly. So what those squiggly lines show are a couple of different electrodes on the scalp, one here and one here. And so this is the electrical activity that's going on in the brain. And this is kind of just an average of millions of cells that sit under these electrodes. So, but on average, we see these trends, which suggest that there really is something going on that's different. So that top line, fast random activity during wake. When we close our eyes and get drowsy, we have this alpha pattern that occurs primarily at the back of our head as we close our eyes and shut off some of the visual stimuli. Stage 1 is a transitional stage. It's about 2% of the 1 to 2% of the night. That's that stage as you're falling asleep. If you were holding a ball as you were falling asleep, your body might relax. You might drop the ball, jerk awake, and know exactly what's happened, but just realize that you've kind of drifted off. You can call it a liminal state. Then there's stage 2, about 50% of the night. I'm not going to go into any of these squiggles here. We actually know less about stage 2 than the other stages. Stage 3, this is the good stuff. You might call this the dark chocolate of sleep, the really good, rich, deep stuff. And this, you can see these slow, big, huge brain waves. So when a kid is in this stage, and they spend a lot of time in this stage, particularly younger children, you can pick them up from the car seat, put them in their crib, they will not budge, right? If you work in Talayeh's profession and you're on call, or you're in the ER, and you're allowed to take a nap, you wake up from this stage if you were asleep for about 30 to 40 minutes, and you are out of it. You are deep in that stage. So in that stage, our bodies are relaxed, our breathing slows down, our heart rate slows down. Then that's about 25% of the night. And then the final stage is stage REM, which stands for rapid eye movement sleep, which is when dreaming occurs. And that looks almost like awake. And so a couple of cool phenomena during REM sleep, again, I think I said 25% of the night, is we dream. Our eyes look around the room. If we were, dreaming about a tennis match, you can, on one of our tests, you can actually see the eyes go back and forth. Or if you saw, dreaming about a fly, you might go like that across the room. And so the reason, if we're going to run and jump and try to catch that fly, our whole vestibular system, meaning our whole system that kind of gets us feeling like we're moving through space in time. And like, our toes, if you ever watch a dog dream, right, you're seeing every single little muscle on them move. We do that too. But we are paralyzed. Dogs are too, for the most part. We're paralyzed when we're in dreaming sleep, which is good. It keeps us from acting out our dreams. Another time we could talk about a disorder where we don't have that paralysis. So that's some basics. So there are basically a couple take-home messages there. One is that what's going on during the night varies phenomenally across the course of the night. Do you want to jump to the next slide?
I have something to say before we do jump.
Sure.
Since we talked about these stages, some questions that have come up for me through the years. During your stage 1, you shared that you may have that jerky movement. Many people get worried about that. That is absolutely normal. It's a hypnic jerk. Happens to so many people. So it's nothing to be concerned about. You may wake up with an elevated heart rate or in a panic feeling just shortly, but that's okay. It's normal. So that's one thing I wanted to comment on. Yep. Secondly, many people are very focused on how much stage 3 sleep they had because they know it's when you heal, when you grow, and how much REM sleep they've had. Many people are concerned they didn't get enough with their technology that they look at it. So it's important to know that when we're younger, we have a lot more stage 3 sleep. And as we get older, we have a lot less. Doesn't mean anything is wrong with anyone if you don't have a lot of stage 3 sleep in your older years. Also, REM sleep, we have a different amounts of it. Everyone is different, more of it in the second part of the night, but also whatever medications you may or may not take will change that density. So a lot of things play into this. And it's very important not to be focused on a percentage of how much I had and am I abnormal. We are all different. And it doesn't mean a lot, most scenarios.
I'd like to ask you a question about that. I do, in my studies around issues like PTSD, one of the things I remember coming across was that when people have experienced deep degrees of PTSD, one of the things that disappears is their ability to remember any dreaming. Have you heard about this in your work?
I would argue that if you, most of the people that I see with PTSD have a different chemical nature of their sleep, and they are awoken more often in their REM and they have vivid dreams. But not remembering your dreams may mean that it happened in a different stage, or you just think you need to remember it. So I don't think not remembering dreams means anything in particular.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd agree 100%. People say, oh, I never dream. In fact, everyone dreams every single night. You might, if you have PTSD, Talayeh said there may be a different kind of bioelectrical or electrochemical imprint. Or if you're on certain medications like antidepressants, that changes your rapid eye movement sleep. But everyone dreams every single night. And not remembering our dreams is not necessarily an indicator of something negative. Can be, but generally not.
And you're saying it could be an indicator of can you repeat that? I'm just curious. If you're not remembering it could be an indicator of.
You could be overly sleepy. You could be sleep deprived, and you're just not. We tend to remember our dreams more when we wake up at the end of a dream, right? So we have a little bit of an awakening. And I can actually, if you want to go to the next slide, I can kind of give some context for that. We cycle children's cycles are a little bit faster, about 90 minutes. Adults are a little bit longer, about 100 plus minutes. So when we go to sleep at night, if you look across the bottom of this axis, this is just time. So 2200, I'm using military time here, 2400, 2468 a.m. So these are the sleep stages and how they cycle throughout the night. So we go from wake down very quickly to non-REM stage 3, that really good deep sleep with all those huge waves. We have a huge appetite for that stage of sleep. You can call it a sleep appetite, if you will. So we want to get that really good deep sleep. And then we cycle up for a brief little bit of REM sleep, and then back down, little stage 2, little stage, then stage 3. Every time, and this is really important, particularly for people with insomnia, we wake up every time. We have a little bit of an arousal, at least, every time we cycle in from one stage to another stage. We don't remember the vast majority. Remembering them and being obsessed about them is called insomnia, right? When you wake up between those stages and you get frustrated. Why the heck am I awake? Well, you can start to tell yourself, in reality, you wake up because you're human, right? So instead of waking up and getting frustrated, and instead of waking up and look at the clock, say to yourself, this is a reminder that I'm a human being. This is good. This is fine. So I'll just say a couple more things quickly about this slide. Awakenings are not atypical. We have most of non-REM stage 3 in the beginning of the night. We kind of satisfy our sleep appetite. And then as we progress through the night, we have more rapid eye movement sleep. And we have our long dreaming periods toward the morning hours. And so when we have those long dreaming periods, we might tend to wake up out of one of those and remember our dreams. Or it's a in some ways, it's not really lighter. It's still a very deep stage of sleep. But some people actually have a lighter degree of sleep and can wake up. Some people wake up because they have sleep apnea, or because their partner moves, or because they live in a flight pattern, any number of things, or they set their alarm at variable times in the morning because of work or whatever, and that might wake them up from a dream state. So there are a whole bunch of reasons why you might be more or less likely to remember your dreams. We can talk about it another time. There were some COVID effects that I think people were remembering their dreams more during COVID, during when we were all really shut in. And there's some various reasons why that may be the case. So, what else? Anything else to add about this cycling of stages, Talayeh?
No, I agree. And usually when we go from REM to that lighter stage, definitely there's some awakenings there, and it's not abnormal. I get that question also. If it's more than 2 to 3 times, then maybe something to talk about with the healthcare provider, but it's not abnormal just getting up 1 to 2, even 3 times.
Yep.
So I just want to recap that.
I don't remember my dreams. I'm just personally, usually I have to wake up early in the morning and be like, oh, well, that was a cool dream.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time I don't remember my dreams.
Adolescents, unfortunately, who are, sorry, I'll just say quickly. Yeah, so this getting back to the school start time issue. Adolescents, because you have all that REM sleep in the morning, most of it, right? Adolescents wake up early in the morning and they lose a chunk of their rapid eye movement sleep. They still have a REM, rapid eye movement sleep drive, but they lose that. And what we know is that when we go into rapid eye movement sleep, there are several areas of the brain in the deep brain stem that are responsible for some of our emotion regulation, or at least serotonin and dopamine. And when you suppress rapid eye movement sleep, those regions of the brain don't get to rest. So when the emotional region of the brain doesn't get to rest, we all know that if you're sleep deprived, right? If you miss a night of sleep or only sleep a couple of hours, the next morning, what happens, right? After one night? Well, you can be a little hypomanic, right? You can be kind of up and going. It's like, okay, I feel okay. Come noon, 1, 2 o'clock, you crash. Yeah. But if that happens chronically, 5 days a week, you have to get up and you're missing a chunk of your dreaming sleep. It can lead to poor emotion regulation, depression, and a whole host of other problems, because you're robbing regions of your brain that need a period of quiescence, of rest, from getting that rest.
I have witnessed that firsthand. And it can be gnarly, because they're already dealing with so many hormonal changes when you're dealing with kids at different stages of development. And I think about this of all ages, actually, because now at my age, I not only treat, but also am aware of my own hormonal changes, right? And how through every phase of life are going through hormonal changes. If you're adding the sleep deprivation to it, what that adds on top of it all is just, that's pretty big stuff. That's something that I think a lot of us really underestimate, the effects of how deeply that's affecting us. So thank you. Speaking of that, go ahead.
I agree.
Yeah, you agree. Yeah. So I know we were also going to speak about, well, I just want to recap that basically what you're saying is it's totally natural to wake up 3 to 4 times a night. Is that correct?
I like to say 1 to 3, but I don't know if there is a hard fixed number.
Okay, but at least to wake up a few times a night. Yes.
Yeah.
And then what I'm also, even that was significant to me when we first were having some of these conversations behind the scenes, because I was never told that. I never learned that in Western or Eastern forms of medicine. I always got the impression if I'm waking up, something's wrong, right? And I think a lot of people think that. So when obviously there's so many reasons for why they're waking up, but what are some of the kind of rituals or tendencies that you might suggest to people when they are waking up? But then for one thing I'm hearing is that we want to be sure and not judge it, right? To calm yourself down around it and not make it a crisis. Because if you create a crisis, then there's the cortisol right there. It's going to keep you up even longer. So any other suggestions, things that you're finding are quite useful for people in those moments?
Yeah. You can look at various factors. So caffeine has a pretty long half-life. So if you're having a late afternoon dose of caffeine, for some people even chocolate at night, if it's in your system, right, and you go to sleep, you sleep that first 3 to 4 hours and satisfy your primary sleep appetite, right? And you still have a little bit of caffeine on board, right? That awakening can be amplified by having that caffeine on board. The other, there are lots of tips, and we can talk in detail some other time maybe about treating insomnia. But one of the most important issues, in addition to reminding yourself that you're a human being if you wake up, that's good news, I guess, is that that awakening you can stay calm and don't look at the clock. And nobody has ever been able to justify why they would need a clock in their bedroom or next to their bed, right? Don't look at the clock in the middle of the night. See what happens for a week if you can be very disciplined and not check the time and tell yourself, it doesn't matter what time it is. In fact, awesome, great news, my alarm clock hasn't gone off yet. Woohoo! I get to sleep more or rest.
Without needing to care what stage of sleep I have left available to me, right? Or like how much time I may or may not have. So what I'm hearing you say is take a little bit of the emphasis off of whether or not you're getting enough linear time committed to your sleep of what you think you're supposed to have. Is that what I'm getting?
Yeah. And the other piece is that this also gets back to this idea that human beings don't all sleep the same way, right? There's variability in how we sleep. There are some there's good indication that some people really need a biphasic, in other words, 2 periods of sleep, even at night. Some people sleep for 3 to 4 hours, wake up for 2 to 3 hours, do some really good work, and then go back to sleep in the morning for another 2 to 3 hours. And historically, there's evidence that cultures did this more commonly because of our kind of 24/7 life and work and exposure to media and everything else that we do in our 8-hour workday, right? This is not
10 or 12-hour work days for a lot of people.
12-hour work day that we got to cram our sleep into this one little package at night, right? It's just not. It's not necessarily what humans do or what they need. Are we adaptable to it? Well, some of us are, but some of us aren't. And that's where sleep disorders come online. Talayeh was talking before about people having like a 24 plus hour sleep period. There's some people who, when you don't give them cues, or even without the cues, their biological clock is more of like a 28, 30, 36 hour day. Right? It's called a free running cycle, where they don't reset, where the cues just don't help them reset, and they just cycle through the day. It's another whole fascinating kind of sleep disorder, circadian rhythm disorder, that we can talk about another time, perhaps.
One thing I'd like to ask too, I want to point out actually, we're talking about dream state and we're talking about REM. We're also talking about whether or not we remember dreams and whether that's significant. I do know that there are different traditions that really emphasize the potency and the kind of spiritual medicine that can be gotten. I know them speaking in very different terminology right now. But Tibetan Buddhism, for example, there are traditions around basically fine tuning and honing your understanding of the different sleep states, right? Using this for a sense of greater consciousness and internal awareness and awakening as a human. You know, when I say awakening, it means like spiritual consciousness level of awakening, not being awake with your eyes open, but being able to take that awareness of sleep state and trail it into the awake state, right? Or to use meditative kind of capacities to hone in on the other subconscious states and use that knowledge gained to be utilized in our other awake times. I'm also thinking about things I heard about with Albert Einstein, that he was known to have come through a lot of his understanding of what he did in his work. He said came through his sleep state, or he'd wake up from a nap and he'd get it, or he'd remember something from that state. So can either of you speak to this a little bit?
Let me sleep on it. I'll get back to you.
I think for me, I enjoy Eastern medicine a lot, but there are some things that I struggle with. For example, in the Yoga Sutras, there is a sutra that says how you can control your sleep stages.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's hard to really, comprehend because you can't, And so I think I agree with Dan. I don't have an answer for it. I know if you sleep deprive someone, they'll have more REM sleep and they may have some bizarre dreams. And you may have an aha moment and think of something, but I don't know if I can scientifically answer that question.
I'm even thinking about, Freudian theory. When you get into psychology and you study Freud was really big on that concept around sleep and sleep consciousness. So, and Danny, did you ever get into that in a deeper way?
No, not really. I've not really gotten into dream analysis. I mean, what I think we know about dreams is that they are, any unitary aspect of sleep, or really anything in medicine, and particularly in the brain that we look at, when we try to distill it down to a thing, it's complex, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the deeper we go into the neural connections and what it does, it's super complex. So if you want to think about dreams, one of the phenomena that dreams provide is that they help us process what we've done during the day. They help us work through difficult or routine activities. Different phases of sleep. There's some beautiful work by a couple of people at Harvard in particular who've done research. Oh, I'm forgetting his name right now. I know Hobson was one who wrote a book called The Dreaming Brain. There's another guy whose name I'm not remembering right now. But he's basically taken memory, creative problem solving, mathematical problem solving, and looked at how each of these different types of mental phenomena map on to adequate or inadequate amounts of sleep at night. They've done beautiful studies on this. So there's also fascinating overlap, and this is a whole number 2 to 3 podcasts. There's fascinating overlap between. So think about what's going on during dream state, during meditation, and during a state when you're in an atypical state, say with a plant medicine, some kind of psychedelic, so to speak. Different regions of the brain, the salience network, the default mode network, the executive network, the sensory perception network, the memory network, they go on and offline during these different states and phenomena. So during sleep, there's now evidence that there's actually continuity of mental activity, not unlike what goes on during the day in some regions of the brain, but other regions of the brain go offline. So there's just speaks to the complexity of sleep, and that dreams are a way of maybe the default mode network is offline. That means our ego is offline. It's actually not during dreaming sleep. I think it's actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Talayeh, but it's actually more online during dreaming sleep. But other regions of the brain are not. So we're processing, I think, a lot of ego related work during dreaming sleep. During other phases of sleep, we may have, it may be that, Einstein's aha moment, that sleep facilitated some kind of problem solving that occurred that was essential for him to have some vision of how either mathematical formulas or how an image of, how a black hole can actually have a gravitational force that's essential for, the universe to function the way it functions.
You mentioned psychedelics, and I recall hearing that they found psilocybin inside Einstein when they were doing, when they were finding out what's he taking, what's he doing. So, so I find that interesting and fascinating what you just brought up about the psychedelics aspect of this, and what role do all these states of consciousness play, whether we think we're sleeping or waking, or what's going on and off and firing when we're in different states of being, right? So I know that's a whole other field in itself. We could talk about that for a whole long time right now. But it's interesting research.
Dream sleep and REM sleep, and Danny touched on this a little bit. It's important to know that if we're calling dream sleep, the dream recall sleep, the REM sleep, it is when we have memory consolidation. But another very important function is that we let go of the things that don't matter. So something fearful you saw on TV, you let go of it during that REM sleep. And I like the wording that Danny used. I said a chemical imbalance in PTSD. It's more of a different biochemical footprint. And in those people, whatever their PTSD may be, they actually have they have more norepinephrine, and they can't let go of those fearful things. And so it's very important to know that dreaming is still an enigma. It's still being studied. But we do know that it's important in memory consolidation and forgetting the things we don't want to hold on to. It's important for that integrity of the neural networks. And so that's super important. And it really draws attention to good sleep, all stages, each function, and 3 for your growth and recovery, your REM sleep for your memory consolidation. Every stage is important. We have to go through all of them appropriately. And our body's smart. It does its job if we let it. And that's the part that we need to work on, our habits and what we do with sleep.
I love that you just said that. I really am a big believer in that, if we allow ourselves to get more into the observational role and have less judgment and less comparison of I'm right and wrong, or maybe I'm abnormal and not as human as the other people and what they're doing, we could really do ourselves a favor and trust that we're all part of nature. Nature is pretty magnificent and pretty intelligent. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to add today? I wanted to say, if there's something else you could say that maybe hasn't been said that you feel is important for people to know or hear, what might that be as part of a way to close for today?
I think it's important for, the word mindfulness in medicine was always shocking to me, where I thought, where did this come from? And I feel it came from the Eastern medicine world. Well, we brought it in and we tell people to be mindful. What does that really mean? We use it very loosely, but to truly be mindful is to be mindful of oneself. And if you feel good, if everything seems right, it doesn't matter how many hours you slept, how many times you woke up at night, it's working. So if you wake up refreshed, if whatever you're doing is not a problem, it doesn't matter. The details don't matter. And I think that's what's being mindful about oneself. Now, if what you're doing isn't working for you, that's when you need to talk to someone.
And how when you say something isn't working for you, meaning you're finding you're having more stress because something's just, I would love to hear what you mean by something isn't working for you.
So the sleep schedule you have, for example, it's not working for your job. You're going to lose your job if you don't change something. Or you wake up exhausted, even though you think you're sleeping 7 hours, 8 hours. That's something that's broken, if you will, that you need help fixing it, maybe healing it. But if it's just that I want to go to bed at 12, but I need to sleep at 9, that's what the books say, that's what we need to let go, is to listen to your body and let it decide when you're sleepy and go to bed. And if it's working, if you're taking 5 naps a day, but you're struggling because you want to sleep at night, okay, maybe let's talk about it. But if you're taking 5 naps a day and you're sleeping at night and you're not worried about it, it's not a problem.
Danny, what might you add to that? I'd love to hear. Is something that you think is important that people should hopefully walk away with?
Yeah. So, I'd say learn about sleep. Really ask some questions about your sleep. Observe your sleep. If you, as Talayeh said, if you have difficulty waking in the morning, or if you're sleepy during the day, the number of people in epidemiologic studies who admit to falling asleep briefly when they're at a red light, right, is an indication of either insufficient sleep duration, insufficient sleep timing, or an existing sleep disorder. So I think maybe the most important take-home message, just to, and this really repeats what Talayeh said, is that if you are having some indication that you're not getting a good night's sleep or not well rested during the day, speak with your provider about it, right? Don't just look it up online to figure out what's going on. Talk to your provider, because what that does is it forces them to begin to think about sleep more, right? When we teach consumers, and this is where I like wearables, when we teach consumers to think about their sleep on a daily basis and more about it, and bring those questions to their providers then need to educate themselves more and think more carefully about what this phenomena is that they didn't on average get much education on. Maybe an hour, 2 hours, maybe 3 for medical school. All of medical school, right?
Crazy, considering how many hours in our lives that we spend sleeping. That's stunning.
There's a curriculum in medical school.
Wow.
Yeah. And the one final piece that I'll say that we really didn't get into at all today is that if you snore, or if your partner snores, talk to your physician or your provider about it. Snoring is not a normal condition. I'll give everyone a little piece of homework. As soon as you wrap up this podcast, take a moment and snore about 3 or 4 times, right? And you will realize that basically it's a form of nocturnal asphyxia, right? It really is a form of nocturnal asphyxia. You can't know if you have mild, severe sleep apnea or just primary snoring. Get that checked, because that has very significant implications: increased risk of heart attack, stroke, automobile accidents, obesity, and diabetes.
I really want to emphasize that. I want, before you do, I just want to say I've had a number of clients over the years that had no idea how serious that was, and discovered they were having mini strokes that literally led to brain damage that was so severe it even ruined their careers and had big impact on their families. So I don't take that lightly at all. What you just said is so important. That you want to look at diet, you want to look at speaking to your provider, you want to look at all the things you can do to change that and open up your airways in ways that are necessary. It's very important, everybody. I thank you for saying that. Talayeh?
What I wanted to share is, if you don't snore, it doesn't mean you don't have sleep apnea. So snoring is important to report, but if you're sleepy during the daytime and you don't snore, you still may have some sort of sleep disordered breathing. I threw sleep apnea out there, but that's for a future podcast we'll talk about.
Thank you. Thank you. That's an important note that I didn't know. So thank you. And I know that one of the things we've talked about is that we want to provide some resources. So anyone who's watched this podcast or has listened to this podcast, just know that there will be a link connected to wherever you're looking that will provide you the opportunity to have some overview of how to do sleep log. That's one thing we were going to try and offer something in that, and also just some more educational resources, places you can go to learn more about some of what was talked about today. How can anyone reach you? I know you don't necessarily have a website, but I know that some of you might be on social media, either of you. If you're open to sharing that, please do say it, and I'll mark it off for us in written form as well. Anything you want to say about how anyone could reach you right now?
Find us through Terra Wellness.
Terra Wellness, yes, that's one way. Talayeh, what were we going to say?
I'll work with you afterwards. I don't really have any social media that's accessible for patients. It's personal, so I'll work with you to make one, so we have a way for people to reach out to me.
Good, it's about time. I'll help you. Thank you so much, both of you. I do hope we can have a conversation again and get a bit deeper into some of the other places we didn't have get into today. But this is such a wonderful start. And I really hope anyone that listens to this understands that this is a very valuable and necessary part of our lives that we all need to become more educated around, and require and request other specialists to make it a point of educating themselves better about. So thank you for being leaders in this field and sharing in this way. It really is an important one. I really appreciate you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk sleep.
Yeah. And so, everybody, if you liked this, please share it with other people that you love and care about. And if you want to have some comments and say follow, please follow. All of these things help other people that aren't connected to you directly to find this information. It means a lot. And I will provide, like I said, more details in other ways right after we end here. So have a wonderful rest of the day, both of you. Thank you again. Blessings.
Thanks.
Hey, friend. Thank you for meeting with me and my guests. Go to TaraWellness.com to join my newsletter and find out what else I'm offering. Please like and follow this podcast. Check out the Tara Gold Wellness video version on YouTube and follow me at Tara Gold Wellness on Instagram and TikTok. Let's keep meeting at home. Home.